Good morning, and welcome to our session on Introduction to Pharmaceutical Supply Chain and Risk Management. I look forward to guiding you through the scientific and regulatory foundations that help organizations deliver safe, effective medicines reliably to patients. In this lecture, we will connect quality and operations by showing how supply chain management, SCM, and quality risk management, QRM, work together across the life cycle, from sourcing and manufacturing through distribution and post-market surveillance. Today, we will review essential concepts, regulatory expectations, practical tools such as failure mode and effects analysis, FMEA, and a real-world case study to illustrate decision-making under constraints. Throughout the session, I encourage you to reflect on your own settings and think about where your supply chain is most vulnerable and how a structured, proportionate risk approach could improve both compliance and resilience. Let us begin with the learning outcomes that frame today's journey. By the end of this session, you should be able to articulate a clear definition of pharmaceutical supply chain management, SCM, and quality risk management, QRM, and explain why both disciplines must be integrated to achieve safe, compliant, and efficient delivery of medicinal products. SCM refers to the end-to-end planning and control of flows of materials, information, and finances from suppliers to manufacturing, distribution, and the patient. In the pharmaceutical context, SCM is inseparable from quality assurance and good practice requirements, GXP, because poor coordination anywhere in the chain can translate directly into patient harm or regulatory non-compliance. QRM, as codified in ICH Q9R1, provides a formal, science and risk-based framework for identifying hazards, analyzing the probability and severity of potential harm, implementing controls, and continuously monitoring the effectiveness of those controls across the product life cycle. We will start by mapping the end-to-end, E2E, supply chain, including upstream suppliers of active pharmaceutical ingredients, APIs, excipients, packaging components, and device parts, in-house or contract manufacturing and testing, storage and distribution under good distribution practice, GDP, and downstream partners such as wholesalers, hospitals, and pharmacies. This map helps reveal critical nodes where variability, contamination, temperature excursions, data integrity lapses, or geopolitical events can propagate into product quality or availability risks. You will learn to classify risks into major categories such as quality, e.g., microbial contamination, mix-ups, label errors, regulatory, e.g., nonconformities against 21 CFR Part 211/820 or EU GMP MDR requirements, logistics, e.g., cold chain disruptions, capacity constraints, port closures, financial, e.g., supplier insolvency, foreign exchange volatility, and cybersecurity, e.g., ransomware compromising batch records. With this taxonomy in hand, we will practice selecting proportionate QRM tools, including brainstorming, checklists, failure mode and effects analysis, FMEA, fault tree analysis, and hazard analyses such as HACCP for distribution, and show how the choice of tools should be commensurate with risk criticality and the availability of data. A key learning outcome is to conduct risk-based supplier qualification and ongoing monitoring. You will be able to describe how to determine supplier criticality, specify the expectations in quality agreements, establish entry criteria, e.g., audits, certifications, process capability, and define performance metrics such as on-time in full, deviation rates, and temperature excursion frequency. We link these metrics to predefined acceptability criteria and show how to escalate from routine surveillance to enhanced oversight based on signals and trends. Finally, you will design mitigation and monitoring plans that are both effective and efficient. Examples include dual sourcing for single points of failure, targeted incoming inspection plans based on historical defect data, enhanced change control for high-impact suppliers, and contingency stock strategies informed by demand variability and lead time risk. Throughout, we will emphasize the importance of life cycle thinking, transparent communication, and governance so that risk decisions are consistently documented, reviewed, and improved over time. The importance of risk-aware pharmaceutical supply chain management, SCM, cannot be overstated because failures in sourcing, manufacturing, or distribution can translate directly into preventable patient harm. Consider a sterile injectable that experiences a temperature excursion during transit. If that excursion goes undetected due to poor data capture, the product may lose potency or sterility assurance, exposing patients to ineffective therapy or infection. Conversely, false positive alarms or over-conservative responses can trigger unnecessary waste, shortages, and treatment delays. An integrated quality risk management (QRM) approach seeks to minimize both types of error, false assurance and false alarms, by deploying proportionate, evidence-based controls. Regulators explicitly expect risk-based control strategies. ICHQ 9R1 frames risk as a function of probability and severity of harm, with decision-making aligned to scientific understanding and life cycle management. In the device context, FDA's Quality System Regulation, 21 CFR Part 820, embeds risk concepts through design controls, supplier controls, and process validation. In the pharmaceutical context, EU GMP, US CGMP, and GDP reinforce that quality must be built into the product and maintained throughout distribution. Firms therefore need traceable rationales for their supplier qualification standards, sampling and testing plans, and changes to sourcing or processes. Beyond compliance, risk management creates economic value. By focusing attention and resources on the most critical hazards and bottlenecks, organizations reduce scrap, rework, and expedited freight, shorten lead times, and stabilize capacity. The global disruptions of recent years, including pandemics, port closures, and geopolitical tensions, have highlighted the fragility created by single-source dependencies, just-in-time inventories without robust contingency plans, and limited visibility into multi-tier suppliers. A mature QRM program integrated with SCM supports scenario planning, dual sourcing where appropriate, and inventory strategies that are explicitly justified by risk and demand variability. Finally, trust and transparency depend on clear, timely communication of risk information across partners. Quality agreements should specify notification timelines for changes, deviations, and potential shortages. Dashboards should surface leading indicators, and governance bodies should document decisions and rationales. In short, robust risk management is not merely a regulatory obligation, it is a strategic capability that safeguards patients, assures supply continuity, and strengthens the organization's reputation with regulators, healthcare providers, and the public. This slide grounds our discussion in precise terminology. Supply chain management, SCM, refers to the coordinated end-to-end planning and control of flows of materials, information, and finances across suppliers, manufacturing, distribution, and the patient interface. In pharmaceuticals, SCM requires close integration with quality systems because every flow is subject to good manufacturing practice, GMP, and good distribution practice, GDP requirements. Quality risk management, QRM, is the formal, systematic application of policies, procedures, and practices to the tasks of risk assessment, risk control, risk communication, and risk review. ICHQ 9R1 states that risk is the combination of the probability of occurrence of harm and the severity of that harm. We differentiate hazard, the potential source of harm, from harm, the actual damage that might occur to a patient or user. To evaluate risk, organizations often consider severity, occurrence, or probability, and detectability. For example, in failure mode and effects analysis, FMEA, a risk priority number, RPN, might be computed as the product of severity, occurrence, and detectability scores. While simple and accessible, the RPN should not be used mechanistically. Teams should also consider the nature of the hazard, the ability to detect it in time, and the magnitude of potential patient impact. Criticality refers to the importance of a supplier, material, component, or process to product quality and supply continuity. A sterile component supplier providing a primary container closure system for an injectable is typically considered high criticality because failures directly affect sterility assurance and patient safety. The criticality designation guides the rigor of qualification and monitoring. Supplier qualification is the risk-based process of determining whether a supplier can consistently meet specifications and quality expectations. It generally includes document reviews, e.g., certifications, process validations, and site or remote audits, sample evaluations, and trial orders. Entry criteria should be proportionate to risk and codified in procedures. Once approved, suppliers are monitored continuously using predefined metrics such as on-time delivery, deviation rates, complaint trends, and temperature excursion frequency. Finally, the life cycle approach emphasizes that risk management is not a one-time exercise. From development to commercial manufacture and post-market surveillance, the risk profile evolves as processes change, volumes grow, and new data emerge. QRM processes must therefore incorporate periodic review, change management, and learning from deviations, complaints, and regulatory findings to ensure ongoing state of control. Regulatory frameworks explicitly expect risk-based control strategies and thorough supplier oversight. ICH Q9R1 articulates a life cycle QRM model that spans risk assessment, risk control, risk communication, and risk review, with decisions grounded in science and an understanding of process variability. In the United States, FDA's Quality System Regulation, 21 CFR Part 820, for medical devices requires design controls that link user needs to design inputs, outputs, verification, and validation, robust supplier controls, and process validation. For pharmaceuticals, current good manufacturing practice, CGMP, regulations in 21 CFR Parts 210/211 and parallel requirements in the EU recognize that quality must be designed into the product and maintained through controlled manufacturing and distribution. The EU Medical Device Regulation, MDR, and In Vitro Diagnostic Regulation, IVDR further emphasize safety, performance, and post-market surveillance, while EU Good Distribution Practice, GDP, anchors the integrity of distribution with requirements for temperature-controlled storage, qualified transport, calibration, and deviation management. Across jurisdictions, expectations converge on documenting risk rationales, implementing proportionate controls, and demonstrating that monitoring systems detect and correct drift before patient risk escalates. Quality agreements translate these expectations into specific, bilateral commitments between a manufacturer and a supplier or service provider. Effective agreements clarify responsibilities, documentation standards, change notification timelines, right to audit clauses, deviation and CAPA handling, and communication pathways during potential shortages. They also align on data integrity expectations following the Alcoa Plus principles, ensuring records are attributable, legible, contemporaneous, original, and accurate, with added attributes such as complete and consistent. The takeaway is that compliance and good science are aligned, using formal QRM methods to analyze hazards and implement proportionate controls helps firms demonstrate a state of control to regulators and auditors, while also delivering predictable quality and supply continuity. Documentation is not a bureaucratic afterthought. It is how risk knowledge is made explicit, shared across functions, and improved over time. The architecture of a pharmaceutical supply chain spans upstream suppliers of active pharmaceutical ingredients, APIs, excipients, packaging materials, and device components, internal or contract manufacturing and testing, and downstream wholesalers, hospital systems, and pharmacies. Each node is governed by specific good practice requirements, GMP in manufacturing and GDP in distribution, and each handoff is a potential risk point. Visibility beyond the first tier of suppliers is particularly important because sub-tier disruptions, e.g., a solvent producer or resin supplier, can propagate into critical shortages without early warning if not monitored. Core operations include material receipt and sampling plans, manufacturing steps with validated processes, in-process controls, laboratory testing, batch release by qualified persons or authorized QA, and robust deviation kappa systems. Cold chain products require temperature mapping of facilities and transport routes, use of qualified shippers and data loggers, and clearly defined excursion handling supported by stability data. Documentation must be contemporaneous, attributable, and auditable to support regulatory inspections. On the downstream side, GDP codifies the controls necessary to maintain quality during storage and distribution, qualified depots and carriers, calibration of monitoring devices, segregation and labeling practices, and procedures for complaints and returns. Track and trace systems, such as those driven by serialization requirements, e.g., USDS CSA and EU Falsified Medicines Directive, support anti-counterfeiting, diversion control, and precise recalls. Effective serialization also improves inventory accuracy and facilitates data-driven replenishment. Finally, change control and cross-functional governance are the glue that binds the chain into a coherent, managed system. Changes to suppliers, materials, methods, or equipment must be evaluated for risk, justified with data, and approved by the appropriate bodies, including quality assurance, QA, regulatory affairs, RA, supply chain, SE, and technical operations. This governance ensures that local optimizations do not inadvertently degrade overall robustness or compliance, and that knowledge is captured for future improvements. Reliable risk management begins with systematic identification. Structured brainstorming sessions can leverage cross-functional expertise to surface plausible hazards, provided they are guided by a facilitator, time-boxed, and supported by curated checklists tailored to the product class and logistics profile. For example, sterile injectables demand attention to aseptic process risks and container closure integrity, while biologics highlight cold chain fragility and sensitivity to vibration and prolonged exposure. Process mapping is a powerful precursor to failure mode and effects analysis, FMEA. Mapping the material and information flows reveals interfaces where miscommunication, mislabeling, or data integrity failures can occur. In FMEA, teams enumerate potential failure modes at each step, analyze their effects and causes, and estimate severity, occurrence, and detectability to prioritize actions. When distribution is a significant risk vector, hazard analysis and critical control points, HACCP, style approaches help identify control points such as packaging qualification, pre-culling steps, route selections, and receipt verification. Supplier audits and document reviews expose systemic weaknesses such as inadequate training, insufficient process validation, incomplete quality agreements, or data integrity vulnerabilities. The scope and frequency of such audits should be proportionate to supplier criticality and performance history. Increasingly, organizations blend on-site and remote techniques, supported by digital document rooms and live process demonstrations. Finally, robust identification treats operational data as a rich source of signals, deviations, complaints, stability trends, and near-miss reports all point to latent hazards that may not have been fully anticipated. Statistical process control, trend charts, and simple run rules can highlight shifts before they become excursions, while qualitative review of narratives can reveal human factors issues. The goal at this stage is not to prove causality but to cast a wide net, documenting plausible risks with sufficient clarity to support focused assessment. Once risks are identified, they must be assessed in a manner commensurate with their potential to harm patients. Qualitative matrices provide a simple way to categorize severity and likelihood into tiers such as low, medium, and high, enabling rapid triage. Although coarse, they are often adequate for early program phases or when data are sparse. For more granularity, failure mode and effects analysis, FMEA, offers a structured approach that assigns numerical ratings to severity, occurrence, and detectability. The resulting risk priority number, RPN, helps prioritize actions, but teams should be cautious not to overinterpret RPN differences when ratings are uncertain and should consider severity independently when patient impact could be high. Fault tree analysis, FDA complements FMEA by modeling logical paths to define top event, such as a temperature excursion or critical material mix-up. FDA can reveal combinations of contributing failures and highlight where redundancy or improved detection would break the path to harm. When sufficient data are available, quantitative scenario analysis, such as Monte Carlo simulations, can estimate distributions for lead time risk, safety stock sufficiency, and service level outcomes under different mitigation strategies. These models inform decisions about dual sourcing, buffer inventory, and capacity investments. Crucially, assessment must be anchored in explicit acceptability criteria linked to patient impact and regulatory expectations. Severity descriptors should be defined in terms of clinical consequence. Likelihood estimates should draw on data where possible, and detection capability should reflect actual signal fidelity and timeliness. Decision rules might specify, for example, that any hazard with potential for serious patient harm receives focused controls regardless of estimated probability, while lower severity issues may be managed through trending and periodic review. Transparent documentation of rationale supports both internal governance and external inspection readiness. Mitigation strategies should be proportionate to risk and justified with data. Avoidance seeks to eliminate hazards at the source through design choices, such as selecting materials with robust stability profiles or specifying packaging that prevents light or moisture ingress. Clear specifications and unambiguous labeling reduce the chance of mix-ups. Reduction strategies focus on process capability and monitoring, validated processes, controlled environments, calibrated sensors, and statistically justified sampling plans all reduce the likelihood of defects and excursions. For distribution, qualified shippers, route risk assessments, and real-time telemetry can lower both probability and undetected duration of temperature excursions. Risk transfer is appropriate when contractual and insurance mechanisms can allocate responsibility and provide financial protection, but it never transfers ultimate accountability for patient safety. Quality agreements and logistics service level agreements, SLAs, should define performance metrics, escalation paths, and data sharing expectations. Acceptance is warranted when residual risk is low and the cost or complexity of further control outweighs the benefit. However, acceptance must be accompanied by contingency measures and enhanced surveillance to detect drift early. In supply chain design, dual sourcing mitigates single point of failure risks, but it introduces its own complexity, such as change control, comparative validation, and inventory synchronization. Targeted incoming inspection based on historical defect rates and criticality can efficiently detect supplier variation without excessive cost. Safety stock and strategic buffers should be sized using probabilistic models of lead time and demand variability, with expiration risk accounted for in perishables. Business continuity plans are most effective when tested through tabletop exercises and, when feasible, through controlled stress tests. Such rehearsals expose unclear roles, communication bottlenecks, and fragile assumptions. As with all QRM activities, mitigation must feed into risk review. Performance data, deviations, and external events should trigger periodic reassessment and continuous improvement. Technology provides leverage to detect, prevent, and respond to risks faster and with greater precision. Internet of Things, IoT, sensors embedded in pallets and packages generate real-time temperature, humidity, and shock data, enabling exception-based monitoring that focuses attention on shipments trending toward excursions. Telemetry platforms can automatically trigger interventions, such as re-icing or route adjustments, based on predictive thresholds rather than after-the-fact alarms. Advanced analytics are increasingly applied to demand forecasting, lead time risk estimation, and anomaly detection in quality signals. Machine learning models can flag atypical patterns and deviation narratives, batch yields, or supplier delivery performance, prompting earlier investigations. However, analytics must be validated and governed to avoid over-reliance on spurious correlations. Domain expertise remains essential for model design, feature selection, and interpreting outputs within a QRM framework. Blockchain and related traceability technologies address the long-standing problem of fragmented data and asymmetric visibility across partners. A shared, tamper-evident ledger with role-based access can improve end-to-end serialization, enhance anti-counterfeiting defenses, and accelerate targeted recalls. The key is to integrate such tools with existing enterprise systems and to establish data standards, governance, and legal agreements that preserve privacy and accountability. Digital Quality Management Systems (QMS) and audit streamline document control, change management, and supplier oversight while strengthening data integrity controls in line with Alcoa Plus principles. Finally, environmental, social, and governance (ESG) priorities are shaping SCM decisions. Greener packaging, route optimization to reduce emissions, and waste minimizing inventory policies can align sustainability with resilience. The guiding principle is pragmatic. Technology should be selected and validated to improve risk detection, decision speed, and compliance without adding unnecessary complexity. Pharmaceutical supply chains are inherently global, with multi-tier supplier networks spanning jurisdictions that differ in regulatory expectations, infrastructure quality, and geopolitical stability. Geopolitical risks, such as sanctions, trade disputes, or sudden export controls, can disrupt access to critical inputs like sterile components or key intermediates. Compliance with trade laws and embargoes must be integrated into supplier qualification and planning processes to prevent inadvertent violations and to anticipate alternate routes and sources. Persistent drug shortages reveal the challenge of balancing resilience and affordability. Lean inventories reduce holding costs but can amplify the impact of demand spikes or transit delays. Conversely, large buffers risk obsolescence and waste, especially for products with limited shelf life. Risk-based inventory policies that explicitly model lead time variability and service level targets can better reconcile these tensions. Counterfeiting and diversion are significant concerns in cross-border distribution. Serialization and track and trace systems improve detection, but their effectiveness depends on broad adoption, data quality, and timely sharing across the network. Robust downstream partner qualification, clear handling procedures for suspect products, and public-private collaboration enhance security. Regulatory heterogeneity adds complexity as agencies update requirements in response to new technologies and public health priorities. What counts as acceptable evidence for temperature excursion assessments, for example, may differ across markets, requiring careful documentation and scientific justification. Finally, workforce capability is a limiting factor. Supplier development programs that build quality culture, problem-solving skills, and data literacy can raise the baseline performance of critical partners and reduce the oversight burden while improving outcomes for patients globally. This case examines a shortage risk affecting a disposable reservoir used in insulin pumps. The manufacturer relied on a single-source supplier for a precision-molded component with tight tolerances and biocompatibility requirements. A sudden equipment failure at the supplier's facility halted production and compromised capacity for several weeks. Early signals included rising back orders and slippage in promised lead times, accompanied by a cluster of supplier deviations related to tool wear and dimensional drift. A risk review escalated the issue to executive governance and triggered the business continuity plan. The immediate action was to initiate rapid qualification of an alternate supplier previously scouted but not fully approved. Engineering provided drawings and critical to quality (CTQ) characteristics. Quality teams defined a compressed but defensible qualification plan, including material certifications, capability studies on critical dimensions, extractables leachables assessments, and performance testing in assembled devices. In parallel, the original supplier launched emergency tooling repairs and added shifts. To bridge the gap, safety stock targets were temporarily increased for the finished device and the reservoir component, and incoming inspection frequencies were tightened with expanded sampling for dimensions at the edge of capability. Regulatory engagement was proactive and documented. The manufacturer notified relevant authorities and, where required, submitted a change notification package outlining the risk assessment, comparative data, and enhanced monitoring plan. Quality agreements were leveraged to clarify responsibilities, change control documentation, and communication cadence. Throughout, the decision-making process was recorded with explicit references to ICH Q9 principles, including justification for accelerated testing, acceptance criteria, and residual risk acceptance contingent on intensified post-market surveillance. Following expedited but thorough qualification, the alternate supplier began deliveries within 4 weeks. Service levels recovered progressively, and no patient harm was reported. Post-implementation metrics tracked included service level attainment, deviation closure time, and the rate of dimensional nonconformities. Lessons learned included the value of maintaining an approval-ready alternate supplier for high-criticality components, investing in early supplier development, and sustaining an accurate inventory of tooling health. From a risk governance perspective, the case highlighted the effectiveness of predefined triggers for escalation and the importance of cross-functional coordination among quality assurance, regulatory affairs, supply chain, and technical operations. Ultimately, the incident improved resilience by institutionalizing dual sourcing, enhancing incoming inspection strategies based on demonstrated capability, and refining safety stock policies with probabilistic models that reflect lead time uncertainty and demand variability. Thank you for attending this lecture. Here is the list of references. ICHQ 9R1 Quality Risk Management provides the authoritative framework for risk assessment, control, communication, and review across the product life cycle. It underpins risk-based supplier oversight and proportionate control strategies. FDA 21 CFR Part 820 Quality System Regulation codifies design controls, supplier controls, process validation, and corrective preventive action in the U.S. device context. Its principles inform risk-based practices across combination products. EU GDP Guidelines 2013/C343/01 establish distribution requirements, including qualification of depots and carriers, temperature control, and deviation management, essential to protecting product quality and ensuring traceability. Chopra and Meindl, 2023, a foundational text on supply chain strategy and operations, useful for understanding inventory, sourcing, and risk pooling concepts that inform pharmaceutical resilience design and service level choices. ISP Good Practice Guide, Risk-Based Supplier Audits, a practical guide to scoping, executing, and following up on audits proportionate to supplier criticality and performance, with templates and examples aligned to industry practices.